What's up guys, Jeff Cavalier, ATHLEAN-X.com. Today I'm going to try to help you to understand the best way to perform your reps when you're trying to build muscle, because there's a lot of variables that go into this. However, I have to start in answering this question by asking you one, and that is, what are you training for? Because there's a difference between training for strength and training for hypertrophy or increased muscle size. So let's say you were training for strength, and we'll give an example like a barbell bench press. Right? If you're trying to get stronger here, then there's one thing that you should be looking for out of this exercise, and that is efficiency. In other words, when you're doing this exercise, you should not be caring about how to isolate the chest from the triceps, from the shoulders. You want them all to work in concert, because at the end of the day, your absolute level of strength, or the output of how much you could actually lift, is going to rely on the fact of all those muscles contributing together to that lift. So we're not trying to do anything but be very efficient at recruiting those. You also want to have some element of speed. You want to be able to accelerate that bar, because power and strength will go hand in hand often. So you want to make sure you're working both of those things. However, when we're talking about building bigger muscles, which is the subject of this video here, you want to actually do the opposite. You want to try to find ways that you can be inefficient. In other words, find new ways to challenge your muscles so that they're forced to have to come back and grow bigger and stronger. And that doesn't always come in the form of just using heavier and heavier weights, because at some point you wind up stalling out there. So let me use an example here of a lat pull down, right? If I was going to do a traditional lat pull down, if I was trying to do this for strength, I'd have weight on the bar here. Actually, let me go a little heavier. I'd have enough weight on the bar here to challenge me. I wouldn't necessarily care, I'll go underhand. I wouldn't care about isolating the biceps, right? From the back, the lats, the rhomboids. I'm trying to move this thing, still with good form, right? But try to get strong and let all those muscles that prefer to work together, work together. That's one way to do this. If on the other hand, I wanted to kind of introduce a different stimulus, I could take a lighter weight and then try to become much more inefficient. And that means, let's slow this thing down. Let's make this thing absolutely miserable for my lats if it's the lats I'm trying to grow here. So what I could do is, firstly, I'll go overhand, right, to get the biceps out of it a little bit. Get into the lats, get that narrow grip, keep my elbows in front of my body, go at a slower pace, drive my elbows down, really squeeze, come up out of it. Good stretch at the top. Again, this is all inefficient. And it's not what you'd want to seek out if you were trying to maximally test your strength. But when we're trying to overload these lats, all of these individual stimuli are good, right? That good hard focused contraction, that lengthened time that I'm in this stretch, right? Applying more tension here. Still having good amount of weight on the bar. I didn't go super light. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm using a good amount of weight that still challenges me. But all of these things would make anybody looking at this say, wow, that was pretty damn inefficient there, Jeff. And they'd be right, because it is, but it creates growth. Let me take you here to the board for a second. So if we were looking at, let's say, those two examples. Okay, this is, let's just say, intensity on this side. And this is the rep count. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. That does not look like a 5, by the way. All the way up to 10. In that first example, I'll bring out different colors. I do these more than just drawing my body with these things. So the first example, let's say it was my 10 rep max, or 8 to 10 rep max here in blue, and I was going to do it to 10 rep max failure, or 8 to 10 rep max failure. Okay? Whatever I chose, that would be my failure point. What would have happened is, in terms of the effort level on the first rep, you just imagine that the weight is heavy enough to kind of start a little bit higher on that intensity line here, right? Because we know we're using something that's going to cause failure in that 8 to 10 rep range. What happens is, though, it's not that difficult on the first rep, or necessarily the second rep, or the third rep, or the fourth rep. It starts to kind of catch up at the end, where it really starts to skyrocket in difficulty level, and it gets very difficult at the end. And we talk about this all the time, these being sort of the effective reps, the ones that actually cause real muscle growth. But it kind of takes a while to get up there, okay? If we took that lighter weight, whatever this one was, the second round here, let's just say it's like my, 13 rep max weight, right? Odd number, but I just want to show you that it's lighter. But I'm going to perform it to 10 rep failure, right? Can we do that? We definitely can do that. We can do that by doing what I just did there. Slow down the reps. Do something called 1.5 reps where we come down halfway, go up, and come back. Like we're using more range of motion, more time and tension, all that stuff. So what happens here is you would think that this, being a lighter weight, would start down here on that intensity line. But if from rep 1, I do something very difficult where I slow that thing down, really squeeze, get that elongated stretch on the way up, I could actually theoretically jump that. I really could. I could jump the intensity there because the difference in weight here can be made up through the intensity techniques that I'm using. And by getting at a higher level here, we also know that rep 2 is going to be pretty damn challenging too. Because again, we're using these techniques that intensify things. So rep 2, rep 3, rep 4, it's really getting and staying at a higher level throughout, and then what happens is just the fatigue of the set alone is going to make that continue to climb higher, higher, higher. So whether it finishes above or below, the idea though is they're pretty close, and if anything, this set that was very inefficient actually took place with some of those techniques that made this more difficult from start to finish. So the tension that we got here, the cumulative tension, could actually be higher underneath that curve, the red lighter one, than it could be maybe in this one, even though it peaked out over here. And even if it peaked out at a higher level, right? Even if it peaked out somewhat higher over here. It doesn't matter. Now, what's the benefit of that? The benefit is that you don't always have to lift super heavy weights to get things to work. I will actually show you where super heavy weights don't work. You want to make sure that you're understanding these things because I think people just think of in absolutes, right? If I took a really heavy weight down here, and now I grabbed that same weight, and I got down, and now my set looks like this. Right? Whatever that might look like. I would argue that even though it was super heavy, do I have another color here? Even though it was super heavy, that's down here. Because those are shit reps. That was all momentum. That was not a muscle you were trying to build there, that was momentum. And momentum dictated that there really wasn't a lot of muscular effort going on that. So therefore, whatever that results in is not going to be what you were looking for. Same token, do we go super light? If I went super light here, okay, and I grabbed these, and I went right for the lats, it doesn't matter how hard I'm squeezing here in that contracted position. And even if I wanted to perform a 1.5 rep and come up and then come back down again, or if I wanted to go to the top and then get a good stretch and then come down halfway and go back and get another stretch because we know those are good. It doesn't matter. The weight isn't enough. The amount of tension on that weight doesn't even qualify, right? It doesn't even register on this line here because it's just too little. And again, no matter how much I'm doing here, unless I did extremely high rep counts, nothing is going to overcome the fact that there just wasn't enough on that bar to begin with. So the point is, when you're trying to figure out which is best, it really depends on A, your goal, being strength or hypertrophy, and from there, the exercise that you're doing, because it will vary depending upon the exercise. The intensity that you train at, that's everything, because again, that determines where the off-ramps are. If you're going really super intense with different techniques, you'll be able to do shorter workouts and fewer repetitions and still reach failure and still get a response. But if you're not doing those things, then you're not going to see that. One final benefit here to this blue line, because I want to really express here how important both of these approaches are in the big picture. But this blue line, don't let people tell you that you can only build strength in, let's say, the 3, 4, 5 rep range. If you started out doing 10 of this weight that you had here, and then you could do 11, and then you could do 12, and you can do 13. You're increasing your strength. Don't let anybody fool you. You're getting stronger at that lift. When you get stronger here, what happens? It brings everything up. So all of these lines here, this red dot, this blue dot, has the strength of your blue dot here, goes up and starts out at a higher point. The red dot is going to go along with it, right? Because it's a higher rep range, but it's still your absolute level of strength. So it's going to raise all boats. So the idea is you don't want to eliminate one technique or one approach versus the other. You certainly don't want to avoid strength training. At some point that matters too, but you want to train for both strength and hypertrophy, and you do want to explore these higher and lower rep ranges because they're both going to matter as long as you know how to apply them.